The color of regret. The first snowfall of winter always brings him back to me. Not in person, we haven't spoken in 23 years, but in memories so vivid they feel like they happened yesterday. That's the thing about first love, it etches itself into your bones. Even when you think you've moved beyond it, the smallest trigger, a song on the radio, the scent of sandalwood, the first snow of winter, can transport you back as if no time has passed at all. I was folding laundry when I saw the flakes begin to fall outside my kitchen window. My hands stilled on the warm cotton of my husband's shirt, and just like that, I was 22 again, standing in a different kitchen, watching a different snow through a different window, with Michael's arms wrapped around my waist and his chin resting on my shoulder. "Penny for your thoughts," David says, startling me from my reverie. My husband of 18 years stands in the doorway, his reading glasses perched on his nose, newspaper tucked under his arm. I smile. "Just watching the snow." He nods, accepting my answer without question. After all these years, David knows there are parts of me he'll never fully access. It's not that I've been dishonest. He knows about Michael in broad strokes. But some memories feel too sacred to share, even with the man who knows me better than anyone else in the world. Or perhaps I keep them close because sharing them would force me to admit how often I wonder what might have been. Michael Reeves walked into my life on the first day of my senior year of college. I was struggling with the combination on my new locker in the Fine Arts building when a voice behind me said, "Need some help with that?" I turned to find the most beautiful man I'd ever seen. Dark curls, eyes the color of espresso, and a smile that made my stomach flip. He wore a faded denim jacket with paint-stained cuffs and carried a portfolio case slung over one shoulder. "I'm hopeless with these things," I admitted. "Let me." His fingers brushed mine as he took the paper with my combination. "I'm Michael, by the way. Transfer student." "Emily," I replied. "Art major, obviously." "Obviously." His smile widened. "Me too." "Painting?" "Photography." "Ah." His eyes lit up. "You capture the world, I try to reimagine it." Just like that, we fell into conversation as if we'd known each other for years instead of minutes. By the time he got my locker open, we'd discovered we shared 2 classes and a hometown just 30 miles apart, though we'd never crossed paths until now. Serendipity, he called it, with that smile that would become my undoing. Looking back, I wonder if it was serendipity or something darker. Fate setting us up for the fall. Our love bloomed quickly, intensely. Michael saw the world differently than anyone I'd ever known. Where I looked for perfect light and composition, he saw stories in chaos and beauty in broken things. "Your photographs show the world as it is," he once told me, "but my paintings show the world as it could be." We'd spend hours in the studio, me capturing him as he painted, him sketching me as I developed prints in the darkroom. Our professors noted how our work changed, deepened. His paintings became more grounded, my photographs more emotionally evocative. By winter break, we were inseparable. I brought him home for Christmas, and he charmed my parents with his earnest questions about my father's carpentry and his genuine interest in my mother's quilting. "He sees people," my mother whispered to me as we washed dishes. "That's rare, Emily." It snowed on Christmas Eve, and we sneaked out like teenagers to walk through the silent, white-covered streets of my hometown. Under a street lamp, snowflakes catching in his dark curls, Michael kissed me and whispered, "I'm going to love you for the rest of my life." I believed him. God help me, I believed him. The fractures began in spring. Michael received an acceptance letter from a prestigious art program in Berlin. A year-long fellowship that would begin immediately after graduation. "Come with me," he said, eyes bright with excitement. "We'll live in a tiny apartment, eat street food, sketch in cafes. You can photograph the city while I paint it." My practical nature balked. "And what about my career? I've already accepted the position at the magazine." "There are magazines in Berlin." He laughed, as if my concerns were trivial. There's a whole world out there, Emily. But it wasn't that simple. I'd worked hard for that entry-level photography position at National Geographic. It was my dream job, the first step toward the career I'd planned meticulously. And there was my family. My father's recent heart scare, my younger sister still in high school. It's just a year, Michael argued. We can do long distance. Then I'll come back, or you can join me. But even as he said it, we both knew. A year would become 2, would become 5. The art world was opening its arms to him, and Berlin was just the beginning. We graduated in May. Made love in his emptying apartment as the setting sun painted his walls gold. Promised to call, to write, to make it work somehow. At the airport, he held my face in his hands. This isn't goodbye, he said fiercely. This is just intermission. I nodded, unable to speak through my tears. But as I watched him walk through security without looking back, I knew in my bones that the curtain had fallen on our act together. For 6 months, we tried. Late-night phone calls that left me bleary-eyed at work the next day. Long, passionate emails about his exhibitions and my first professional photo shoot. Promises and plans that grew more tenuous with each passing week. Then, slowly, the calls became less frequent. The emails shorter. The time difference and our diverging lives creating a chasm neither of us knew how to bridge. The final blow came when I saw his exhibition featured in an art magazine. There he was, my Michael, arm around a willowy blonde with kohl-rimmed eyes. The caption read, "Rising star Michael Reeves with girlfriend and fellow artist Ingrid Muller at the opening of his sold-out show." I didn't call him. Didn't demand an explanation. What was there to say? We'd made no formal commitment to each other. The distance had done what distance often does. It had allowed the heart to wander. That night, I deleted his number from my phone, filed away his letters in a box I pushed to the back of my closet, and threw myself into my work with renewed vigor. Life moved on, as it always does. The magazine promoted me. I traveled to 40 countries in 5 years, my camera capturing the beauty and heartbreak of the world. My work gained recognition. I published a book of photography that won modest acclaim. I met David at a gallery opening in Chicago where some of my work was being featured. He was a financial analyst, solid, stable, kind. He asked thoughtful questions about my photographs and listened intently to my answers. He didn't see the world the way Michael did, but he really saw me. And that felt like enough. We married 2 years later in a small ceremony by the lake. If sometimes I caught myself wondering if Michael had seen my book or my exhibits, if sometimes I Googled his name late at night to see where his career had taken him, I kept those moments to myself. David and I built a good life together. We moved to the suburbs when I became pregnant with our son, Jackson. 3 years later, our daughter Lily completed our family. I opened a small photography studio, specializing in family portraits and the occasional wedding. David's career flourished. We renovated an old Victorian house, planted a garden, accumulated the trappings of a successful middle-class life. I was happy. Genuinely happy, even if sometimes I woke from dreams of paint-stained hands and espresso eyes with an inexplicable ache in my chest. The email arrived on an ordinary Tuesday in October, nearly 20 years after I'd last seen Michael. "Emily, I hope this reaches you. I've been following your work over the years, your eye remains as extraordinary as ever. I'm back in the States after 2 decades abroad and will be having a retrospective exhibition in Chicago next month. Some of the pieces from our college days will be featured. I'd be honored if you would attend the opening night. There are things I've wanted to say to you for a very long time." Michael, my hands trembled as I read and reread the message. Then I clicked delete and walked away from my computer. I told myself it was better this way. Michael belonged to my past. Opening that door could only lead to pain? For me, for David, for our children. I had made my choices, Michael had made his. What purpose would it serve to revisit old wounds? But the invitation lingered in my mind. What things had he wanted to say? What might I learn if I went? And more dangerously, what might I feel? In the end, curiosity won. I told David I was attending a photography exhibition in Chicago, not exactly a lie, but not the whole truth either. The first dishonesty in our marriage, and it tasted bitter on my tongue. The gallery was crowded, soft jazz playing beneath the murmur of conversations and the clink of champagne glasses. I stood at the entrance, scanning the room for a familiar face among strangers. And then I saw him. Time had been kind to Michael. His dark curls were now threaded with silver at the temples, lines creased the corners of his eyes, but his smile, that smile that had once been the center of my universe, remained unchanged. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, I was 22 again, breathless with the wonder of being seen by him. He excused himself from the small group surrounding him and made his way toward me. "Emily," he said, and my name in his mouth still sounded like a revelation. "You came." "I almost didn't," I admitted. He nodded, understanding. "I'm glad you did." We stood in awkward silence, 2 decades of unspoken words hanging between us. "Would you like to see the exhibition?" he finally asked. I followed him through the gallery, listening as he explained the progression of his work over the years. His talent had deepened, matured. The raw energy of his college paintings had evolved into something more contemplative, more controlled, but no less powerful. And then we turned a corner, and I stopped short. There, taking up an entire wall, was a series of paintings I'd never seen before. All of them based on my photographs from our college days. The abandoned factory with its broken windows, the old woman feeding pigeons in the park, the children playing in the fountain downtown. But Michael had reimagined them, adding elements that weren't there in reality: a figure standing in the factory window, a younger version of the old woman reflected in a puddle, ghostly adults watching over the playing children. "What is this?" I whispered. "The series is called What Remains," he said softly. "I painted them over the last 15 years, working from memory and the few prints of yours I still had." I moved closer to the centerpiece of the collection. A large canvas based on a photograph I'd taken of Michael himself, standing at the edge of the lake on a foggy morning. In my original, he had been alone. In his painting, I stood beside him, my hand in his, our reflections rippling in the water below. "Why?" My voice caught. "Because I needed to understand what happened to us," he answered. "Why I left. Why you stayed. What might have been if either of us had made different choices." I turned to face him. "And did you understand?" He smiled sadly. "I understood that some questions don't have answers. That regret and gratitude can coexist. That loving someone doesn't always mean you're meant to be with them." His honesty disarmed me. "I looked you up sometimes," I confessed. "Saw your exhibitions in Berlin, Paris, Tokyo. You became everything you wanted to be." "Not everything," he said quietly. The weight of that statement hung between us. "Are you happy, Emily?" he asked finally. I thought of David, solid and true. Of Jackson and Lily, the centers of my world. Of our home, my studio, the life I'd built brick by careful brick. "Yes," I answered truthfully. Not in the way I imagined when I was 22, but yes. Relief softened his features. "Good. That's good." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped package. "I have something for you." I unwrapped it carefully to find a miniature painting. A perfect reproduction of the photograph I'd taken of him on our last morning together, sunlight streaming through the window, casting him in gold. "I painted this from memory," he said. "To remind myself that some moments are perfect just as they are, even if they don't last." Tears blurred my vision. "Michael." We made the right choices, Emily, he said gently. For who we were then, for who we've become. I just needed you to know that I never forgot. That what we had was real, even if it wasn't forever. In that moment, something I'd carried for 20 years, a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged, lifted from my shoulders. Not regret exactly, but the haunting question of what might have been. The fear that I'd missed my one great love for a safer path. Thank you, I whispered, clutching the small painting. As we said goodbye at the end of the evening, he embraced me briefly. Be happy, Emily, he murmured against my hair. You too, I replied, meaning it with my whole heart. I walked out into the Chicago night, snowflakes beginning to fall around me. The first snow of winter. I tilted my face upward, letting the cold flakes kiss my skin, and felt something inside me release. Not the love I'd carried for Michael all these years, but the regret that had shadowed it. David is asleep beside me as I finish writing this, his breathing deep and even, one arm flung across the space where I should be lying. The small painting Michael gave me sits on my desk, a fragment of another life, another possibility. Tomorrow I'll tell David about the exhibition, about Michael, about everything. Not because I need absolution, I've done nothing wrong. But because after 20 years of keeping part of my heart locked away, I want to be fully known by the man who chose me every day, who built a life with me without the backdrop of grand passion but with something just as valuable, steadfast love, unwavering support, quiet understanding. The snow continues to fall outside our window, covering our yard, our minivan, our children's forgotten bicycles. In a few hours, Jackson and Lily will wake up to a transformed world and beg to play outside before school. Life isn't what I imagined at 22. It's quieter, less dramatic, more grounded in daily routines and small moments of joy and frustration. There are no grand adventures in European cities, no passionate artist lifting me onto a pedestal. Instead, there's David's laugh when I burn dinner, Jackson's concentrate scowl as he practices guitar, Lily's small hand slipping into mine as we walk to school. There's the satisfaction of capturing a family's love through my camera lens, the comfort of our home on a winter evening, the certainty of being exactly where I belong. I once thought love was about grand gestures and consuming passion. Now I know it's also about who stays, who shows up day after day, who builds a life alongside you without needing to reshape you into their vision. Michael and I burned brightly, but we would have consumed each other eventually. Our paths diverged because they needed to. Because we each had different journeys to take, different people to become. The snow falls, and I no longer feel the ache of what might have been. Instead, I feel gratitude for what was, acceptance of what is, and hope for what will be. First love marks you forever, this I know to be true. But it's not the only love that matters. Sometimes the love that saves you is the one that comes later, that builds slowly, that doesn't write poetry or paint masterpieces but instead makes coffee just the way you like it and holds you through the dark nights. I close my notebook and slide into bed beside my husband. His arm automatically wraps around me, pulling me close even in sleep. Outside, the snow continues to fall, covering everything in a blanket of white. Not erasing the past, but transforming it into something new, something pure. Tomorrow will be a new day. And for the first time in 23 years, I'm ready to face it without looking back.